What does Iran do? Well, be terribly tempted to swallow up, I suspect, the Shiite rump of Iraq. The Kurds would go their own way. Well, they have been pretty much anyway. But what happens to the Sunnis? I mean, that's a small, relatively small sliver of land alongside the Syrian border. Is it big enough? Is it possible that it could exist on its own? Nobody knows. It's really very disturbing.
John, thank you very much indeed. Well, our diplomatic editor, Mark Urban, has spent the day looking at how big the ISIS insurgency really is and how equipped the Iraqi government are to deal with it.
After the shock of the Sunni onslaught, Iraq is fragmenting. Kurdish troops fighting today near Kirkuk have also taken their chance to carve out a bigger territory for themselves. But in Baghdad, the Prime Minister insists that lost ground can be recovered.
We will teach them lessons, we will deal them blows, and we will deal with those who think that they can defeat the political process and the national unity and defeat Iraq.
The Iraqi army still has several outposts in the north, with fighting continuing in Tal Afar, Baiji, where there's a key oil refinery, and Samarra, a Sunni city, but also home to key Shia shrines. Although ISIS has gone as far south as the outskirts of Baquba, 40 miles north of Baghdad, it hasn't advanced significantly in recent days. But while the situation has stabilized and Iraqi forces are being massed in Taji to counterattack, what are the chances of them actually regaining ground?
Well, I would counsel Prime Minister Maliki, although he probably wouldn't accept it, to replace the highly political commanders that he has put in charge of the Iraqi armed forces with more competent leadership. When the United States was there, we worked with the Iraqi government to put in place competent military leaders, regardless of their sect or ethnicity. But since the end of 2011, when U.S. forces were withdrawn from Iraq, Prime Minister Maliki has packed the armed forces with political cronies, and in effect he's created a force that's very loyal to him and won't launch a coup, but can't fight effectively as well. And if the Iraqi army is going to be used to regain control of the Sunni triangle, it's going to have to be much more competent and willing to fight than it is right now.
But if the army's generals are a losing bunch, its ranks are now being swelled with thousands of enthusiastic volunteers. Most of them are Shia, and the presence of an Iranian general, Qasem Soleimani, the Revolutionary Guard's chief covert operator, has convinced many Iraqi Sunnis that the plan is to form a Shia army.
I think he comes to Iraq to ensure that those who are supporting Iran or those who have been working with Iran will stay in line and will not deviate. He wants to ensure that the influence of Iran will be maintained and strengthened. I think that was his main aim for coming.
The chances of ISIS storming Baghdad are remote. Instead, the security forces are bracing themselves for an increase in truck bombs launched from nearby Sunni towns. And if that sounds like a return to the bad old days of a few years back, so does the idea of American airstrikes. One Iraqi minister called for them today, but there's little enthusiasm for the idea among the US military.
Every time you conduct military action, there are political implications, and it would be, I think, a grave mistake to launch airstrikes now before the political situation on the ground has been clarified. The government of Nouri al-Maliki has been part and parcel of the problem in Iraq with its highly authoritarian and sectarian nature. And if we were to support Maliki now with airstrikes, we would simply be taking his side in this political struggle within Iraq.
But while Baghdad tries to find its response, the enemy has a vote too. ISIS paraded its captured army kit today in Baiji. The first order of priority for groups like this could be snuffing out the remaining army posts, and today they've attacked beleaguered troops at the nearby refinery, which produces 40% of Iraq's petrol and now looks set to fall.
Well, what effect could all this potential disruption have on oil supplies and thereby effects upon the world economy? With us is our economics correspondent now, Duncan Weldon. What are the markets making of all of this? Because they're the first indication, aren't they?
Well, so far the market reaction to these terrible pictures from Iraq has been relatively calm. The price of oil is now above $114 a barrel. That's the highest it's been since last September, but it's not the sort of big move we've often seen when there's turmoil in the Middle East. It's not like the 120 we saw during the Arab Spring. There's a couple of reasons for that. Firstly, the vast majority of Iraqi oil production is in the south and the east of the country and hasn't been impacted. Secondly, Saudi Arabia at the moment has a lot of spare capacity. If Iraqi production is disrupted, they can bring that on stream. The bigger worry is about the longer term picture.
And how worried should we be about that?
Well, this is, I mean, like I said, the initial reaction in the last few days has been quite calm. What people in the oil industry are starting to fret about is the longer term picture. At the moment, Iraq produces about 3.5 million barrels of oil a day. That's about 4% of total world supply. But over the next 20 years, that 3.5 million barrels a day is expected by international observers to rise to 8.5 million barrels a day. That is a huge driver of future oil supply. 5 million barrels a day. That's roughly the amount of oil that the UK, Germany and Holland use every day. That's a big gap to fill up if Iraq isn't capable of bringing that on stream. So if that doesn't come on stream, and people are starting to really doubt it now with this talk of civil war and a split, you know, there's a huge problem for the world economy there. You've got this big gap in supply, prices rise. But perhaps most importantly, there is a terrible problem for Iraq, because increasing oil supply, trebling it over the next 20 years, is the key to really boosting their GDP and increasing prosperity in that country. So people are getting very concerned at the moment.
Duncan, thank you. Well, in Washington is the Iraqi ambassador to the United States, Luqman Fahi, and here in the studio is Bayan Rahman, the Kurdistan Regional Government's High Representative to the UK. Ambassador, may I start with you, please? Is your government capable of defeating these rebels without outside military assistance?
We are somewhat confident that the work we will do will have a significant impact. However, we also know that we need immediate support to accelerate that process and to provide us with areas of capabilities such as air supremacy, which we currently don't have. So we need that support now.
So you can't cope?
Alone, it will take more blood, it will be vicious, it will be dirty. What we're saying is that we need the support of the United States and other countries because of the urgency on the ground and because of the type of enemy we're facing.
How is it, talking about this enemy, that such an apparently smaller force should have been able to take so much of your country?
There's a lot of reflection now going on within the military infrastructure. We've changed some of the high commands, maybe more will follow. But what we're saying is that's an issue for us to discuss with our partners as to how we can beef up and relook at our military capabilities. But the threat is an immediate threat now.
So that your military was inept, that's the problem, is it?
The military was developed as a new military. The military has been working with the United States. With the abruptness of the U.S. forces leaving at the end of 2011, the military had no air force. They had not enough infantry. Intelligence gathering was still fragile. So these are all capabilities which we are trying to develop a new state. So but the viciousness of the situation, the spillover from Syria, these are all factors which have adversely impacted us.
So your military was incapable. What help do you want from Iran?
We are asking for help from the United States.
Would you like help from Iran?
There are bigger regional issues to discuss, but what we're saying is that the strategic framework agreement we have is with the United States. The United States is our key partner of choice in developing our military, in other areas of cooperation, and this is what our focus is on.
Of course, Iran is operating already within Iraq, isn't it?
In what sense?
The Al-Quds Brigade, for example.
I'm not aware of that.
You're not aware of that. Would you finally, just before we'll come back to you in a moment or two, but would you like military assistance from Britain as well?
What do you mean by from Britain as well?
Would you like air support from Britain?
No, certainly not. The key capability we are asking for is for the United States to stand by us, as our strategic framework agreement talks about the integrity of Iraq. Now we have a serious situation. It's not a purely only Iraqi domestic situation. It's a regional threat. That's what the urgency and the depth of that challenge is.
Okay, we'll come back to you in a moment or two, I hope. Bayman Rahman, can you tell us where the government of Kurdistan stands on all of this?
Well, from our perspective, this is a crisis on three fronts. It's a humanitarian crisis. We have tens of thousands of refugees who have fled to Kurdistan from Mosul. It's a security crisis, as Ambassador Luqman Faili has said. It's a crisis that affects not only Iraq, all of Iraq is in mortal danger. It affects the region, it affects the Gulf and even further afield. And it's a political crisis too in Iraq.
We've seen many pictures of your Peshmerga fighters engaging the ISIS forces. For whom are they fighting, your fighters?
Well, the Peshmerga's initial role and primary role is to protect the people and the stability of the Kurdistan region. And we have now gone into the areas outside of the Kurdistan region, which are part of Kurdistan, to protect the people there and key strategic infrastructure as well.
Does that mean they're fighting to support the government of Iraq, the central government?
Kurdistan is part of Iraq. Yeah. According to the constitution, the Peshmerga are part of Iraq's defense forces. If Kurdistan is part of Iraq, we are defending the people of Iraq.
By means of the central government?
How do you mean by means of the central government?
These forces owe their loyalty to the government of Kurdistan, which is part of the constitutional arrangement in Iraq, isn't it?
Yes.
Do they thereby owe their loyalty to the government of Iraq, Nouri al-Maliki?
I would say that the current government in Baghdad would find it hard to find loyalty in Kurdistan. We have not been shy of pointing out repeatedly over the past few years that the government in Baghdad has been sectarian, has been divisive, has been marginalizing the Sunni Arab community, has tried to keep the Kurdish community and the Kurdish leadership out of decision making. We have been very frank about that, and we have called for a change of governance in Baghdad.
Ambassador, the implication of all of that is that your country is quite close to breaking up.
The country is at a critical test. It does need its partners and its international countries who are involved in its development after 2003. It has been fragile in the politics. Now we need to relook at that. But we also know that the wealth of Iraq can help in the development, but the politics that need to be relooked at, and the threat is immediate.
Just one further point.
Sure.
You and President Assad have a common enemy in ISIS. Are you now allied, therefore, effectively with President Assad?
We are facing an immediate threat in our own country. We're dealing with that ourselves. The situation in Syria has never helped us. We hope that the situation is addressed regionally. The players who are involved in the fight against terrorism have to work closely. In that extent, I think we're dealing with a situation within Iraq ourselves.
Okay, thank you both very much indeed. Well, now, time for What is the Point of Ed Miliband, Chapter 5. It's not as if he's in power and having to take unpopular decisions. It's not as if he's committed the country to unpopular wars. It's not as if there's the faintest breath of scandal about him. And yet, less than a year out from the next election, polls show he hasn't much more appeal than a flatulent dog in a lift. Significant numbers of Labour supporters feel less likely to vote for the party because he's leading it. Time to get the judgment of the man who makes Svengali look like an amateur, Peter Baron Mandelson of Foy. But first, Emily Maitlis reports.
This must be a head-scratching moment for Ed Miliband. It's not as if he hasn't produced radical policies, big thoughts, brave ideas. He's had no contentious foreign policy, no bloody wars. His entire focus has been on those squeezed by recession. And yet his personal poll ratings continue to plumb new depths, with less than a year to go. The party of today feels very different to that coined in the mid-90s as New Labour. The party whose transformation had begun a decade earlier when Peter Mandelson was working for Neil Kinnock.
I think for too long the Labour Party has viewed television as our persecutor. Well, I want to use television as our tool, as our servant, and we shall be presenting ourselves and putting across our policies and making sure that our spokesmen get the coverage so that they can communicate directly with the people.
As a sign of their rebranding, the Labour Party adopted the red rose. Kinnock was a keen gardener. Mandelson, legend has it, insisted on the long stem. It was a sign that old-style socialism was past, the red flag as both symbol and song relegated to the back end of conference. In other words, this was where the soapbox would end and the courtship would begin.
Our party, New Labour. Our mission, New Britain. New Labour, New Britain.
Mandelson, who alongside Blair, Brown and Campbell took Labour, the failed state, and made it into New Labour, the brand. Out went the dependency on trade unionism and the state. In came the party that was friends with business, celebs. The party, crucially, that could befriend the middle and upper classes and seize the centre ground of British politics. But if the message was the thing, the messenger, in its various guises, was not universally popular. Mandelson would at times go by the nom de guerre Bobby, a recognition by Tony Blair's team he was often toxic within his own party. He gained a reputation as one of New Labour's most ruthless operators, media savvy, but not always friendly.
I am today resigning from the
There were those within the party and outside it who would cheer his downfall when it came. He resigned from government not once, but twice. It was the Mandelson-Campbell legacy of spin that gave Labour its shiny new coat, as well as its cloak of darkness.
The way in which Alistair has conducted his operations when he was in Downing Street, when he bullied and lied his way across our political life consistently, did more to lower the tone of our political life, our public life, than anything else.
And it's perhaps that legacy that has confounded Ed Miliband.
Unlucky.
This way, no, this way. Where is it?
A leader that at times doesn't seem to know whether he's coming or going, who poses with a paper one day and apologises the next. Tomorrow, Team Miliband will announce major policy reforms, amongst them the end of the Young Job Seekers allowance, with the aim of getting those with little education into training. The mood may well chime, the man at the centre may yet struggle. Those around him know the journey from New Labour to what he calls a one-nation Labour government may still have a long way to go.
Well, with us now is Baron Mandelson, the political prince of darkness who helped create New Labour and whose career has encompassed spells around the cabinet table in several departments, including business and Northern Ireland. Do you think Ed Miliband is the best leader your party could have?
In my view, he is the leader we have, and therefore the leader I support, and somebody who I believe is capable of leading the party to victory.
The best possible leader?
Well, let me, if you don't mind, just step out of the way you framed this. We have a year to go between now and the election. In the coming days and weeks and months, the Labour Party will be bringing forward a whole series of quite forward-looking policies. Having policies, though, without those being drawn together into a convincing and vivid narrative, a story about yourself, who you are, what you stand for, what you're going to do for people in the country, is not enough. You've really got to put all this, draw it all together, connect the policies, link them back to the leader, and give people a real sense of, you know, where you're going and what you're going to do.
Why is he so much worse a leader than Tony Blair?
He's a different leader, Jeremy. I mean, Tony Blair was consciously moving the Labour Party to the centre ground, away from ideology, away from the either-or of British politics. The either you are sort of for the poor or you're for the rich. You're either for the person who works on the factory shop floor or you're for the executive floor in the boardroom. You're either for Britain or for Europe. What Tony Blair did was to replace either or with and he produced a different form of consensual politics that appealed right across the spectrum of the centre ground, leading it from the left, but consciously making that appeal across the centre ground. Now, Ed Miliband is choosing a different course. I mean, what people
working.
Well, what people around him would say is that what he needs to do, or what he is doing, for the Labour Party and the left, is what Mrs Thatcher did for the right in the 1970s and the 80s.
If that's the case, why do 43% of Labour voters, according to the latest poll, want to see a change of leader?
Bring these people on and ask them, Jeremy. I haven't been asked by any opinion pollster.
You're a man who knows what's going on in politics.
What I know is going on is that what Ed is trying to do is approach politics in a rather different way from the way in which Tony Blair and New Labour approached it.
Do you think it's working?
It may work. It may well be successful. And I would say to you, that electoral arithmetic is probably on his side.
Do you think that it would be more effective were he seen to be more pro-business?
I think that he has confused the party's message to business. I think that what he needs to do is to embrace that a model of a market-based economy where we are supporting business success, but where we also want to see a socially inclusive society with principles of social justice, where we're creating opportunities for people and leaning against inequalities in society in everything we do.
How has he muddled the message?
Let me just make the point. He places a great deal of emphasis on the last of those positions, the social justice, the fairness, the leaning against inequality. And I think that's absolutely right for a Labour leader to do so. But he also has to balance that with an explanation of how we're going to bring about economic growth, how we're going to create jobs, and how we're going to create conditions in Britain for business to grow and thrive.
Which he hasn't done yet.
Which he has a year to do.
Which he hasn't done yet, then.
Which he has a year to do.
When you look at the way that people in this country regard politics, and there's a profound disenchantment, I'm sure you'd agree, a profound disenchantment with politics and with politicians. Do you accept any of the blame for that?
Well, I think the condition of politics in Britain today is much weaker than it was 25 years ago. I think politicians are trusted less.
Before you?
Well, the politicians are trusted less, that's true. People vote less. They support the mainstream parties less than they did 25 years ago, and the institutions of central and local government are not held in such high esteem. But the reason for that, Jeremy, I would say, is to do with the profound impact of economic and social changes on our country.
So you don't accept any responsibility for that?
Well, I'm not quite sure what charge you're levelling at me.
The charge is that you got to work on the way that politics happened in this country. You put an emphasis upon spin, you put an emphasis upon presentation, you buckled down a really tight control on how the parties operated, and the consequence of that is that people are disenchanted because the stock response has become, you can't trust politicians.
Well, I'm not going to apologise to you or anyone else for making the Labour Party more presentable and putting it in a better light. But I never made the mistake of confusing good communications and good policies. To me, you can only have good communications flowing from good policies. You have to have a very real sense of what you stand for and what you're going to do for the country. And no number of photo opportunities or sound bites, however effective and attractive, will substitute for that sense of mission that a political party has got to convey to the public.
The appeal of someone like Nigel Farage is that he's not part of a mainstream party, isn't it?
I think it is, because you have a government which isn't popular, and an opposition which is not strong enough, for the reasons that I've expressed, but which I believe the opposition has a year to put right. And so even though many of the people who voted for UKIP the other week, polled subsequently, say they neither like nor agree with UKIP, nonetheless voted for Nigel Farage in order to send a message to the main parties. And it's one they've got to receive and respond to. There's no doubt at all about that.
How much do you think that public opposition to politicians, the political process, is to do with the fact that your friends in government took us into that war in Iraq?
I think Iraq does haunt British politics. It's not yet behind us. And I know that many people in the country believe that when the invasion and occupation of Iraq took place, somehow, you know, the gates of hell were raised to release all that civil strife and all that carnage. And I know that there are people who believe that we are sowing, in a sense, what we reaped. I don't happen to believe it's as simple as that. And as a Labour Member of Parliament, who followed his government's lead at the time and voted for it, I'm not now going to join Tony Blair's chorus of critics.
So you still think it was the right decision?
I think that, on reflection, you could judge that it was a mistake, but this is the crucial point I would make to you. If it was a mistake, it was a mistake honestly made. I do not believe that either Tony Blair or the government as a whole, as some people claim, took the country to war on a lie. I think that's unacceptable. I don't think it's true.
But Tony Blair was saying even this week that it was still the right thing to do. I mean, do you think he's gone a bit nuts?
No, I do not think he's gone a bit nuts, and I think he's fully entitled to defend his position. I also happen to think he's right to say that whereas 25 years ago, when you started on this programme, we had the sort of the relative certainties of the Cold War to deal with, we now have the terrible uncertainties of jihadism, of radical Islam. He is right to point up the dangers of that, and he's right to galvanise people and mobilise people to take the action, to adopt the policies to deal with it.
Peter Mandelson, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now, time for the periodic delight of an interview with the Mayor of London, Boris Johnson. These occasions have a habit of veering from the pedestrian to the extraterrestrial. So this time we thought we'd jump in partway through on a bicycle. The apparent pretext for this interview was a discussion about cycling in London. Some idiot, I forget whether it was me or the producer, thought it would be fun to do it on a tandem. Due to the cuts, the BBC has downsized its fleet, and the only one we could get hold of appeared to have been manufactured sometime before the dinosaurs were wiped out.
Jeremy.
Buzzer! I've got a wonderful vehicle.
Fantastic.
Have you ever ridden one of these?
No, I never have.
Well, nor me.
Not since I was a child.
The chances of staying upright are pretty slim.
Not since I was a child at Knock-a-Lazoot or somewhere like that, probably. Look at that. That is fantastic. Look at that.
I know you want to go on the front, but let's have a practice round here first.
I think we better do that, otherwise... Are we insured for this, old man?
I wouldn't have thought so.
No, I wouldn't worry about that. Christ, it looks a bit...
I thought in the Safer Cycling Initiative we didn't need to be insured. You can go first, otherwise you're going to kick me in the face.
Watch out. Stand clear. Oh, Christ, I almost knocked that thing over.
Oh, crikey, Moses.
We'll put that back.
I don't know what that is. Oh, that's the camera.
That's all right, I just kicked the camera.
Okay,
ready,
good.
Steady, go.
Oh, Christ, it's steep. This is a nightmare.
Are you sure about this, old man?
Yeah, you're steering.
I am steering.
I hope.
Watch out. Watch out. Is your saddle all right? Yeah. Oh, I see that twist when...
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Wait, is that meant to twist?
Maybe a sideways bottom, Boris.
No, a sideways bottom, isn't it? That's extraordinary thing.
Have you got any brakes, Boris?
No, hardly. Brilliant, Jeremy. Keep going. Not too hard now. That's good.
It's your leadership, Boris.
It's going well. I feel it's going well. Oops. I'm so sorry.
This is the most stupid assignment I've ever...
This is your idea.
I've done war zones, Boris, that are easier than this.
I did this as a special favour to you because I care about you so much, Jeremy. You're a landmark of our culture, and I wanted to show you how delightful it is to cycle in London.
It is not delightful to cycle in London. It's a bloody nightmare.
It's absolutely wonderful to cycle in London. This, I have to say, is the most difficult machine I've ever tried to cycle on. But Newsnight procured this.
Boris, this is a bit like being the back half of a pantomime horse.
It is. Watch out. Take care.
Crikey.
Well done. Well done.
Boris,
you're doing good. You're doing good.
Jeremy,
don't give up now. Good afternoon.
People screaming, there's Boris. Does this happen to you all the time?
Yeah, a bit of the time. Some years. Normally they shout, you Tory tosser. Watch out. But there's a Banksy.
Oh, this is a real Banksy, isn't
preserved. Culture. Jesus Christ, that's the police. Okay. I'll do the talking. I'll do the talking. I'll do the talking, all right? You leave it to me. I've been here before. Afternoon. Okay.
There's still about...
Even though...
I mean, I looked at the figures earlier. There's nearly 5,000 people killed or injured, sorry, on bicycles, aren't there, every year?
The total number of serious injuries was 457 last year. And number of those killed was exactly the same, even though cycling continues to rise. Good afternoon.
Where are you on helmets, Boris?
Raindrops keep falling on my head.
Where are you on helmets, Boris?
I'm pro.
But didn't you hear that neurosurgeon the other day say that...
I'm not a mandatory helmet user. I don't believe that they should be compulsory. But I wear one. I generally wear one. Well done, Jeremy.
We're going to get off here, I think, Boris.
4 marks.
Well done, you.
Smashed
this up. It doesn't matter. You smash it up a bit more.
Sorry, thanks.
It's a horrible bike, isn't it?
That is a real bastard, isn't it?
Yeah. Boris, I would like to ask you why the Barclays bike scheme has been such a failure.
Well, what do you mean? It's such a howling success.
Well, then why are they giving up sponsoring?
Oh, yeah. Well, look, I mean, just so we get some clarity on that, it is the most successful bike hire scheme in the world, and
the bikes
people
are rubbish, and the company sponsoring them is giving it up.
Well, the bikes are beautiful. They are big,
lumbering. They're uncomfortable.
Nonsense. Compared to that thing, they're absolutely
compared to a 1901 tandem. Yes, they are.
They're a combination. They are beautiful machines.
Isn't the real problem here that they're always just known not as Barclays bikes, but as Boris bikes?
Well, I know it is a great.
Which actually is a misnomer because it wasn't your idea, was it?
Well, in fact, of course, it was the bicycle was invented, or I think the metal, the fellow was invented by Dennis Johnson. Dennis Johnson.
Was he an ancestor of yours?
Well, I claim without much authentication, dim kinship with Dennis Johnson.
My eye's just been caught by the shard.
Yeah.
There. What do you think it represents?
Well, to me, it looks like the tip of a gigantic cocktail stick that's emerging through the integuments of a super colossal pickled onion.
It's foreign owned, isn't it? It's mainly empty.
It is. I think actually you'll find that
it's a monument to vanity, Boris.
It's filling up, and it's a monument to confidence in the London economy.
How many Londoners are living in that building?
In that building so far, not a lot. But I can tell you that in London as a whole, by volume, sales to foreigners, and including the Irish, by the way, and all other EU nationals, are only running at 6%. The issue for London now is how do we make sure that this sense of, that we don't encourage or have any more of this sense of estrangement between London and the rest of the UK. Because people feel that London is incredibly
It's a separate country, isn't it?
But it isn't. That's the whole point. It isn't. It's absolutely integral to the whole of the economy of the UK. I mean, just give one example. Tourism, which generates about £19 billion for the UK economy. 63% of all tourists to Britain come to London first. What I'm trying to get over to you is what is good for London is good for the whole of the UK economy.
Do you want to cycle back to City Hall?
because this is Jeremy's valedictory program, and I just want to say on behalf of Jeremy's many, many admirers that there will be a lot of people who are very sad to see him go, because he has kept the nation entertained, if not always awake, for many, many years, and has been an adornment to broadcasting.
That's quite enough from you, Boris.
Come on. Come on.
Bloody hell, Boris, this is enough.
Come on, watch out, team, watch out. Don't knock me out. Okay, I'm following you.
So we're
Got some determination, Jeremy. Here we go.
We're on the wrong side of the road, Boris.
No, we're on the right side.
Oh no, it's a one-way street.
Well, I've got Mr. Paxman on the back here. I've got to take exceptional care. I'm carrying the nation's, the last remaining one nation conservative in the BBC. It's a precious cargo. You got to watch out for aggressive drivers.
Oh.
Okay, ease off a bit here. Ease off, Jeremy. That's good. Well done.
Don't take your hand off, Boris. Don't wave. Don't do anything silly.
That's good. We need the money shot, Jeremy. We're going to crash into this bollard. I think it was you. I think it was your idea. Yep, right turn here, Jeremy. Right turn. Okay. Good evening. Hello. Good evening. Good evening. Here we go. Well done.
Well, that was Boris Johnson. Now, Michael Howard, did you?
No, Jeremy, I didn't.
Oh, well,
but feel free to ask another 11 times.
No, I think that's absolutely fine. Thank you very much. So, moving on. England expects the country's footballers must win their World Cup match against Uruguay tomorrow or face returning early and in ignominy from Brazil. Easier said than done, perhaps, because the country has a population, although it has a population only a bit bigger than that of Greater Manchester, yet it's won the World Cup twice, which is once more than England have managed. And their squad includes Luis Suarez. The Liverpool striker was Player of the Year in the Premier League, although he has also a less glittering reputation for biting lumps out of opponents. Our man in Montevideo, or Montevideo as he doubtless calls it, is Stephen Smith. His piece contains some flash photography.
Not quite World Cup fever here in Uruguay. World Cup bit of a high temperature, more like. It's not that Uruguayans are indifferent, far from it. But like English fans, they've seen their team lose the opening match of the tournament. Tomorrow is do or die. And a lot rests on Liverpool's Luis Suarez, gifted but controversial, who seems to embody the national football philosophy, la garra charrua, guts, ferocity, fighting spirit. Newsnight dropped in on a typical Montevideo office to gauge the mood.
Por eso, contratamos a Luis Suárez.
Luisito es un buen trabajador. This ad for a finance company revels in Suarez's bad boy image. His hyper-competitiveness, even his habit of diving. Some people are on the pitch. They think it's todo finito. The signature Uruguayan combo of guile and grit has served the country well. The team won the first ever World Cup on home soil back in 1930, beating Argentina. The old Centenary Stadium has seen better days.
You see the replic of the Jules Rimet?
The man who tends the museum here needs little prompting, though, to recite the Uruguayan Roll of Honor. In a portent which Newsnight doesn't fully understand, he shares a name with the England skipper.
Uruguay won the 15 times the American Cup, 2 Olympic Games, 2 World Cups. I can't explain. It's a miracle.
Football is just your life.
We asked a young sports analyst to account for this success in a country of just over 3 million people.
It's like a religion we have. It's a feeling we have since the very little kid. We are born with football. I mean, the first gift you got when you're a boy, and it's a ball.
Ahí va. Paseásele hacia Mateo. Dale,
Yes,
arriba,
these
arriba,
are the
arriba, Manuel.
deceptively charming
Dale,
tots
dale,
who
Leandro.
grow up to put their opponents on the back foot. As young as 4 and 5, they're encouraged to play for fun, at least at first. A generation or so ago, this football nursery produced a certain Suarez L, and this is the man who discovered him.
What was it about him that made him special?
He was fast, very fast. He scored a lot of goals and would dribble past everyone and then score.
How did you help Suarez develop?
I taught him how to dribble and to pass the ball to his teammates. Players have to learn to pass to each other. In the beginning, he was a bit too individual, but as he went through the system, he grew as a player.
You weren't responsible for teaching him the biting as well, were you?
No.
The training ground of Uruguay's top club, Nacional, where Suarez came as a teenager. It's Spartan by the standards that players at Chelsea or Manchester City are used to, but for a time it was home for the rookie.
How often have you heard it said of some future superstar of the game that he lived, ate and slept football? Well, that was pretty much literally the case for the young Luis Suarez here in his digs at the Club Nacional. He could tuck up and dream of international stardom beneath his team's own coverlet.
As well as Suarez's huge talent, there were discipline issues. It's claimed he once headbutted a referee.
It's not really like that. He burst out from between 2 or 3 players and collided with the referee head-on. So while you could say he was a bit wound up about the way the match was going, the actual collision was just an accident.
At all events, Suarez was given a red card. Perhaps only in Uruguay could a youthful ban like that be linked to a gunman attempting a hit on an investigative journalist, Ricardo Gabito. There's no suggestion that Luis Suarez himself was involved in any crime.
This incident resulted in the referee making a formal complaint with his union and the Uruguayan Football Association. Because of this, the president of Uruguayan Youth Football tried to cover up Suarez's behavior. 11 days after this complaint, I was shot on my doorstep. This whole episode was orchestrated by the president of Uruguayan Youth Football, who wanted to protect Suarez at that time. The hitman that was contracted by Spillman was paid to kill me, but he was remorseful at the last moment. When he pointed his gun at my head, he changed his mind and shot me in the leg.
The gunman was convicted and sent to prison over the failed hit, as was the soccer official who paid for it. To quote Bill Shankly's old adage, in Uruguay, football's not a matter of life and death, it's more important than that. But what of the mercurial Suarez himself? I finally tracked him down to the British ambassador's residence at a reception for the Queen's birthday. What perfidy is this?
There's massive emotion here about the game. There's a great expectation. And I think if the game can be really played well, a clean game and exciting with lots of goals, then I think whatever the result, we'll be able to live with it.
And you want England to win?
I want England to win.
You're allowed to say that, are you?
I don't know whether I'm allowed to say that, but I want England to win.
Good for you.
Soon the talking will stop about who's the best team on paper, or even cardboard, and once glittering careers may enter a new phase.
Steve Smith. Well, that's it. In the tradition of deranged news anchors, I ought to ask you all to go to your windows, throw them up and scream, "I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore." But this is England, so I'll just say thank you for watching Newsnight. I hope you continue to enjoy it. Good night and goodbye.
I'd like to build the world a home and furnish it with love. Grow apple trees and honey bees and snow white turtle doves. I'd like to teach the world to sing in perfect harmony. I'd like to hold it in my arms and keep it company. I'd like to see the world
And tomorrow's weather, more of the same. Don't know why they make such a fuss about it.